Hi, Steve. Do you prefer Steve or Stephen?
Steve, please.
Steve. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the Animal Turn podcast. So, in creating, I suppose, permissible steps or trying to create permissible steps, we need to have ideas of what those are or are not. So I kind of view that this is the work that people like you and Angie Pepper and Josh Milburn are kind of doing, in that you're creating ideas for the rest of us to kind of think with. You're not saying that this is the way to do it, but is this where moral imagination is? Is your
So part of it is painting the picture of what a just world would look like, what kind of institutions we would have, what kind of laws would be in place, what sort of rights non-human animals should have, what kind of attitudes we ought to have towards them. Part of it's that, and then there's sort of the stage of what sort of actions are we morally permitted to do to reach that, and then there's a sort of another strand of thinking about the kind of concepts that we use. So the concepts that we use in moral philosophy, and our everyday talk about morality, are words like rights, like citizenship, sovereignty, autonomy, all of these moral concepts, and many of those they don't fit very well when we talk about non-human animals. When you talk about a person, people struggle to think of a non-human animal as a person. They struggle to think of them as a rights bearer. And then part of the work I think that philosophers can do is show that those concepts will also fit. Which ones can fit well? Which ones can't fit well? How can we include non-human animals in our moral vocabulary? And that can help as well. And I mean, I draw from thinking about the idea of moral progress from people like Michelle Moody Adams, Martha Nussbaum, Iris Murdoch, who talk about moral progress as a coming to appreciate what was already in front of us, right? We should be able to perceive how we ought to act, but we fail to. People didn't see women as having full personhood and being rights bearers, and they should have. And thanks to the work of women, men came round to the idea, right?
Yeah.
They started to perceive that differently, and I think that's the same in the case of non-human animals. We can say, look, I know the idea of a right, or the idea of citizenship, that can include more than human, and because you can see those concepts working, it becomes easier to imagine it, and then that makes progress more possible.
Well, I mean, I guess because the first thing you'll say is, if you're speaking to someone, I think animals should have rights and I think they should be considered persons, maybe one of the first questions someone will say to you is how. And I think if you don't have well, maybe let me put it to you, how? Like, what tools are in our toolbox to kind of start thinking about animals in these politically important ways?
Well, so very often the strategy that animal rights theorists have taken is to say, well, look, many of the problems that you think apply to non-human animals, and including them in our standard moral terms, like rights, like citizenship, like ownership, they apply to all sorts of humans too. And we've managed to apply them in human contexts. We've managed to ascribe rights to children, even though they aren't fully autonomous. We've managed to make corporations persons in law.
I know. And there are rivers, right? Aren't there some rivers that are persons now?
Rivers, mountains. We've managed to give those. We found legal ways with trustees and wards and guardians to have people act on their behalf and to give them legal rights. If it can be done for a McDonald's, why can't it be done for a chimpanzee?
And do you think that this is just purely a lack of moral imagination of putting animals in kind of a significant way in our thinking about politics? I mean, I'm going to foreshadow this.
I think to an extent, yes. I think people just sometimes you talk to them and they are, I just haven't thought of it like that before. I mean, there's a good deal of. I think that foregrounding this sort of stuff as well makes people consider it, right? People make a lot of effort. They go to great lengths to avoid thinking too hard about our relationship with non-human animals. And if you force them, you make it difficult for them to avoid those forms of rationalization or willful ignorance, then it's harder for them to do the wrong thing.